host, Nav Nanwa. We are talking the Panama Papers leak, which is taking the financial industry by storm and actually putting quite the microscope on a lot of key individuals and key, I say, leaders across the country. And join me, actually across the world. Join me to talk about this in greater detail. I have from SRJ Chartered Accountants, Rishabh Khamesra, as well as the business analyst here on Business Casual, Joe Horneck. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me yet again to talk about this topic. The one thing I do want to mention, and we touched on it earlier, that with this leak, a lot of really key individuals, whether we're talking celebrities, public figures, even warlords, we're talking all sorts of people who are making a substantial amount of money or are put under a microscope now, and their finances are really being washed because their names have been associated with these leaks. One in particular being, like we mentioned, the Icelandic Prime Minister having to step down because of his name being associated with this. How do you see this sort of impacting countries? Does it impact certain countries? Does it sort of pose the question that maybe there's financial situations that we need to really drill down on? Or do you think this is just an issue that individuals are just going to have to face and kind of face the music? And Joe, will begin with you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I hope it has big political fallout in these places where people get caught. I mean, one of the nice things you can say about Canada and for the most part also the United States is that we make our political candidates disclose their financial assets.
Yeah.
And to be honest, that's kind of a rarity in a lot of the countries in the world, especially once you get outside of your European/North American sphere. At the Icelandic Prime Minister, it was, again, like a shell company that owned some shares in a bank that he then happened to make some favorable decisions for. But, oh, by the way, I sold to my wife for $1.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound illegitimate to me. You know what? So things like this are going to crop up, and I hope they do have political impact because I think, Justin Trudeau has asked, do you have any offshore assets like this?
Yeah.
David Cameron, his father actually did have some. Yeah. I mean, in David Cameron's defense, it did seem like it was his father's decision. He did benefit from it when he inherited his father's estate, but it was for purely tax minimization reasons. It was not nefarious and illegal and not reported. But that's not to say there weren't other people. I mean, in Canada, we were lucky there were no political people on there.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, good for us. Unfortunately, Iceland, which people usually think of as an upstanding place, the Prime Minister fell down on that.
Well, actually, correct me if I'm wrong, but majority of North America wasn't really present on that list.
Not a substantial amount.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some Canadians, there was a very small number of Americans, but it was not a large number. It was Europeans, a lot of people from Asia, yeah.
And I mean, I think one of the things is that with Iceland, I mean, given that it's a developed country, it's new world, new age. It's very interesting because here we have a prime minister who's basically his job is to tell its citizens, be a tax-paying citizen, make sure you don't evade tax, make sure you don't do anything wrong. And I mean, how big of a hypocrite can you really be if this is exactly what you've done yourself?
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see kind of what's going to happen. I know he's kind of set aside now, but see if he actually resigns, or unfortunately see if this kind of issue gets sucked deep down or in quicksand and kind of just goes away. But I mean, in terms of what owns this gift countries, I mean, I think countries need to really wake up here and realize we need stronger financial and foreign reporting, and kind of the global community, because so much of this world is now globalized, needs to come together and figure out how to have better transparency, and I think that's the most important thing.
I guess the question I have is there a way to maybe combat this behavior of people putting their money in offshore financial centers? Is it a situation where, quite frankly, the rich and wealthy are paying too many taxes, and should maybe their earnings be relooked at? And Rishabh, with you.
I mean, I think that it's always been a common denominator. The rich always feel that they're paying too much taxes, and unfortunately, the average citizen wants to pay as little tax as possible. Now, whether they pay too much or not, obviously that depends on the jurisdiction and where they are, and it depends on their opinion.
Yeah.
But I feel that whatever they are doing, whether they're paying too much or too little, it has to be done based on the rules of that country and being residents of that country. So I think that tax havens, if they aren't really set up in the proper means, or if they are set up for the purpose of tax evasion, need to be cracked down. And they have to make sure that they pay every cent on the dollar in tax that they owe, because that's just the way that the tax system works.
Joe.
And I think, you mentioned about can you shut these down? Sure you could.
Yeah.
Absolutely you could.
Yeah.
If you wanted to, there's lots of ways to do it. So I mean, and I will say this, it's not like a lot of the wealthy countries have not been taking baby steps towards minimizing things like this. So for instance, the United States several years ago produced what they called FATCA, which is basically their asking every other bank in the world to tell them, do you have any Americans who have assets in your bank? And so now when I go and set up a bank account at any Canadian bank, one of the things that you end up signing is, are you an American citizen, or do you have any affiliation with the United States? And thereby, if you trigger yes, I am, your stuff's going to the IRS. Now, and that was so popular. At first, everybody cried foul. How can America do this? Extrajudicial actions. And then everybody said, you know what? I think they've got a good idea. And so now there's the Common Reporting Standard, and that's going to do the opposite for every other country in the world. So Canada is going to be exchanging financial data with Romania and Fiji and anyone else who signs up to this. And there's over 100 countries who have signed up. And so, that data is going to start getting shared back and forth. Now, what it won't help, which in this case is shell companies, which don't disclose who owns them, but they are inching in on this kind of stuff. It makes it harder and harder. It shrinks the world where you can hide these assets. And there's still more they could do, but it takes the political will to do it. And it's something for one country to say, we're going to crack down hard on this. But I think as we're demonstrating with what we're talking about here, is it's so easy to squeeze the balloon and have it move to another section. So, I squeeze a balloon in Canada. Oh, look, it pops out in Panama. So it has to be united action of the wealthy countries of the world to basically say, we're serious about this. You know what? I want to build more hospitals. I don't want to tax my own citizens. I'd like to get tax cheats. And I don't particularly like drug runners, terrorists, and money launderers. So why don't we put them out of business?
And I think both you bring us some very interesting points that need to be considered. And if we take a more of a local lens to this, and let's use the Sunshine List as an example. Being that that's public information. As if you're on that list, we know that you're making a certain amount of money. Should they be open to get scrutinized or open to investigation as to where they're keeping majority of their funds? Like, are we going to get to that method now where it's almost as a safety precaution, there's going to be more new standards put in place to sort of monitor where these individuals are taking their money, and how much taxes are they actually paying, and are we going to see, I guess, a more stricter approach to a lot of those individuals who are at a higher pay bracket? And Rishabh will begin with you.
Well, I don't think it would be generally fair just to focus on the individuals on the Sunshine List. Like you mentioned, they're already scrutinized. They're only kind of looked under the microscope. So to say, these group of people are going to get extra scrutinized just because they are in whether the public eye or whatever the reason may be, I don't think that's necessarily fair. But if there's reason, if they give reason, whether they're listed in the Panama Papers or some other source that there may be something kind of fishy going on, then they should definitely be scrutinized. So I don't think that we should definitely consider just them. We should consider the group who are kind of doing these transactions, which are raising questions.
Yeah, I agree. That's putting a burden on public employees. That's not fair.
Okay.
It's setting up a standard that's not anyone else being held to. But I think the Sunshine List is, it's only one tool. And that's also to kind of just talk about how are we spending our public finances and kind of have an open eye about that. But I think it's challenging because in a lot of cases the Sunshine List has a standard threshold across the province. It's $100,000 whether you live in Kenora or downtown Toronto. And to be honest, living in downtown Toronto, making $100,000, and living in Kenora and making $100,000 are two worlds of differences, right?
For sure.
So I think, to be honest, the Sunshine List has a lot of other things. I think it's got to change, and that might be one of them.
Fair enough. Just to also put a personal lens on this incident, what can we learn about this leak, the Panama Papers leak, that we can sort of apply back to our own personal finances?
Well, I think the main thing is be fully transparent, right? We live in sophisticated economies. Our tax system is very sophisticated. Our tax return, if you actually look at the details of it, pretty much is very comprehensive and involves a lot of different components. So, you have to be fully transparent. And what I always recommend clients as well is don't always take as one person's opinion as the opinion. Shop around, talk to several accountants, talk to several lawyers. Just make sure you're getting the right financial advice.
Joe?
I just keep it simple. I think, every so often you'll see these things in the newspaper about very complex ways to reduce your taxes. And really, if it's that complex, it's probably going to be ruled out of order a couple of years later. Just don't do it. And there's no value. There is value in it, but I just think, it's one of those things. It's like, if you can't explain it to your grandmother, should you really be doing it? Pay your taxes. It's the price of living in a civil society that has great hospitals and wonderful roads.
Exactly.
And you know what? The wealthy do pay more because, we've got a good life, and this is what we pay for in this country, right?
Exactly.
It's a progressive tax system. It helps lift all boats.
You know, we talked about earlier in this segment that, this story is still developing. And one of the most recent developments is the fact that Panama has now agreed to adopt global tax reporting standards. So how do you see that now changing, I guess, the story, or even just the atmosphere around offshore financial centers, Joe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it probably goes back to like the FATCA and CRA regimes that I was talking about earlier. So from what I would understand from that, it means that they're going to share tax data more readily and actually keep track of who owns what.
Yeah.
To me, that's what that means. I mean, the devil's going to be in the detail, but what they're really going to do. But you know what? If you can show up and say, hi, I'd like to form a company. Well, who owns this company? I'm sorry, I can't tell you that. Or it's this other company over here. Well, who owns that company? I can't tell you that.
Yeah.
Like, if they're not going to clean that up, it's not worth it. Like nothing valuable is going to come of that. But I think, I'll give one thing too for the viewers. If you have a chance, one of the things I'd recommend is watch NPR's Planet Money. They, a couple of years ago, set up some shell companies for fun.
Oh, really?
To show you how easy it is to do this. They set up in Belize a company called Unbelievable.
Okay.
where they showed up at the law firm, equivalent to this law firm, and they basically said, well, what are the basic requirements for doing this? Well, you need a board of directors. Who's on the board of directors? Well, if you want, you can just appoint our secretary here. Oh, okay. Rosa, the secretary, is the head of thousands of companies.
So it's that easy.
Yeah. Well, you have to have an annual general meeting. Okay. Rosa sits and taps out an annual general meeting once a year that's half a page long.
Yeah.
That's your entire reporting standard.
Wow.
So I mean, if that's what Panama's going to do, nothing changes.
Rishabh.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think this serves as the limelight on Panama, but I think in order for that to be a real change, it has to be at all the tax havens. It has to be, country or global wise, right? But one thing I'm happy to see is, I mean, from an accounting perspective, a couple of years ago, many countries have changed from kind of their own accounting standards, or in Canada we had Canadian GAAP to IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. And I think what we're going to see, we're not too far from it now, and this was a great example of it, is kind of international tax reporting standards.
Excellent.
Where, countries' economies are working together to make sure that there's transparent reporting of tax liabilities and responsibilities, and making sure that governments worldwide kind of know who owns what and where.
Excellent. Well, I want to thank the both of you for joining me here on Business Casual Talk with this leak. We didn't get a chance to talk about how people are putting money still into Bitcoin and digital currencies and how that's an issue. But that's another topic that we'll tackle here on Business Casual. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you again here next week on Rogers TV.